Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Recruitment Podcast. I have a special guest here today to share his insights and knowledge about product teams, about building products, about product managers, product owners. So his name is Jonathon Hensley, and Jonathon is a co-founder and the CEO of Emerge, which is a digital product consulting firm. So Jonathon also wrote a book about product teams and how they can be aligned. So we are going to talk about some common mistakes when it comes to hiring or recruiting product managers, product owners. When is the right time to get some product manager on board? We're going to talk about some screening or interviewing questions. So this discussion will be especially useful if you are a C-level executive in a smaller company and you wonder if you should get a product manager on board. And you will also benefit from this interview if you are a recruiter and you sort of struggle with these product roles. So help me welcome Jonathon on this podcast. And Jonathon, I would be really interested in learning a little more about why have you actually decided to write this book about products.
I wrote the book for two main reasons. One is I believe that products are one of the fundamental tools that help people change the way that they live and work. And so that's really important to me that we create better and more impactful tools. And then the second part to that was statistically, the vast majority of digital initiatives fail or underperform. And so what I wanted to do is put a spotlight on what is happening that causes those product experiences or digital transformations to fail, so that product owners and leaders could look at that and understand how they could do things in a better way to succeed.
I should have read your book years ago, because when I was the CTO, I was also responsible for the product because there was no other product owner, no other product manager on the team. And I was just somehow thrown into this, and I didn't really know how to manage the product. And also quite a lot of our clients who are CTOs, they are also leading the product. They take care of this responsibility as a part of their job. What would you say they should be aware of? What are some common mistakes that you've seen these IT professionals make?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges for any leader, and especially an IT leader, is that in order to drive, whether it's externally facing product or internal product for the organization, is that product fundamentally has to be grounded with a good strategy. And so strategy is difficult work to do. It's relatively undefined in the broader space. There's a lot of frameworks for strategy that I think professionals lean into, but truly the understanding what strategy is, how it needs to be applied, and then how it can guide a successful digital project and drive technology is really something that isn't discussed nearly as much as it should be. And so one of the good examples there is, I think that when you look at technology, comes with this promise of solving all of these things usually, and it's not really understood that the complexity of it. So if you have a CTO, they innately understand the complexity of technology. They understand how it needs to interact with the business to help the business thrive and succeed. But then how do you ground that to actually drive behavior with people? What does the technology actually do to change a customer experience or to change the employee experience? And very little of that conversation is happening traditionally within technical leadership. And so CTOs now have to really become product experts in understanding not just the technology, but they actually have to understand critical issues of empathy and how do you drive human behavior with technology. And that becomes an entirely different skill set that in the past was not expected or asked for of technical leaders, and today is becoming an essential requirement.
That's so true, so true. And now when I'm thinking about what does it really take for the CTO to be a product manager, it must be also difficult just to step out of their shell, because a lot of them are IT professionals, they are introverts, and suddenly they need to interact with customers and arrange some discovery meetings or calls with just with customers just because they are in the role of the product owner. So it's really challenging, right? So how can they, like, are they even the right person to be the product managers, product owners? Say in a smaller company, smaller team, there is probably no one else. And that was also our case. Now when I'm thinking about this in hindsight, so who is the right person? How can they really tackle this? Imagine a small company, 10, 20 people, how would you do it?
I think it's completely fine for a CTO or technical leader to be a product owner. I think it's another challenge to be a product manager because they are very different skill sets. I think a CTO or technical leader really needs to, one, help understand what is the strategy for the product. So a good example of that is, what's the vision? Where, if we create this new solution, where is it going to take the business? How are we going to measure that? What's the impact on the users or our customers? Or what's the impact on our team if we create this new product or tool to help us fulfill a job or role within the organization? Maybe it's to create automation, or maybe it's to create new business intelligence, or maybe it's to engage customers through things like self-service. It can be a lot of different things. But really understanding the problem space and what you need to solve for, that owner has to take responsibility for that side of owning a product. And fundamentally, the strategy that's built on top of that, where you have the vision, you understand the scope of that problem and its impact, and then you have to clearly define as an owner, what are the outcomes you're looking to achieve? What's the outcomes for the business? What are the outcomes for the end user of your product? And then what approach can you take based on, if you're a 20-person company, you have only so many resources that you might be able to dedicate to solving that problem. What does that look like? How are people supported to solve that? And then how will you measure forward progress towards those bigger goals? That fundamentally has to come from a product owner, no matter what position they sit in. And I think requires a technical leader to really put on their business analysis hat, to really put themselves into the shoes of their customer or their end user, which for some is going to feel very natural, and for some is going to really put them outside of their comfort zone. And that's going to be really difficult to do. Then they can hand that structure to a product manager or to their team if they don't have any official product management in their organization. And they can say, we've hired you because you're the best and brightest in our field. We can build something great together. I'm giving you the foundation that you need in order to understand the problem that we've prioritized for the business. Now I'm going to ask you to go solve that problem for us. And then the team has the essential information to go and vet new technologies and make critical decisions, to consider building new technologies or evaluate what types of solutions could be architected going forward. And so that becomes really, really fundamental in what you do, and maybe how you integrate with other technologies to make that possible. And so that technical leadership can be absolutely invaluable, but as a product owner, and a technical leader, you really have to establish that foundation for your team.
And thinking of the foundation, you also mentioned the two roles, product owner and product manager. For people who are not really sure about the difference, maybe also for fellow recruiters out there who may mix these two roles, are they different? And if yes, then what is the main difference? How would you even see in a smaller company, say 10, 20, 30 people, how would you see these roles evolve?
Traditionally, I think a product owner is really somebody who is in charge or responsible for the results of the overall product. They're responsible for ensuring that it is in alignment with the organization and that it should be built or created. And that is such a key role to making sure that if we create this product and we invest the time and money and energy into it, that it fits with the business's strategy overall, that it creates value. The product manager is really there to orchestrate everything that's happening. Product managers are taking that strategic vision and direction, and they're actually making it, turning it into something real and tangible. They're going deeper into the business analysis. They're coordinating and collaborating with cross-functional teams, whether it be any function of the organization, with designers, with engineers, and they're managing the day-to-day. And in a small organization, usually in some cases that can be one person filling both roles. In large organizations, that's going to start to separate. In very, very large scale organizations, you're going to see product management where a single product manager may be focused on a single feature or even just one user flow within a product, because it's so critical and the value of it is so high that it requires that level of attention and dedication.
Cool. So I'm just thinking about a few of our clients. Some of them are smaller companies, 20, 30 employees, and they may not know when is the right time to bring some of these professionals on board, whether it is a product owner or product manager. So they can, as you mentioned, create the role at some point, but when is the right time? Based on your experience working with different product teams, how would you determine when is the right time to hire these professionals?
I think that it's really important for leaders to recognize or founders of a company is when they are either scaling beyond their skill set or capacity and needing to bring in another leader into the organization who can really drive product and change. And so that can usually come from where an owner or founder has a very clear vision of a product or a solution that needs to be created and needs to now bring in that role to actually fulfill that. What does that look like to actually bring that to fruition? How do we actually create the right processes? How do we build the right team out? And a lot of that times that will start with either bringing in a technical leader or bringing in that product manager who can come and start to oversee that process and that discipline of developing that external or internal product.
Mm-hmm. And once they decide to bring someone on board, how do they determine who is the right person, who is the right fit for a product owner or a product manager? And which one would they start with actually?
Well, I think if you're a small organization, the CEO or one of the founders is probably going to be the product owner. And I think for smaller organizations, that ownership is usually needs to stay with a founder or senior leader in the team, because in many cases that product is the company's offering at that level, if you're at that size, or it's mission critical infrastructure that is just as important, that really has to be facilitated by in a small organization by senior leadership. At that stage, it's really helpful to bring in, I think my personal opinion is, bring in a product manager, somebody who can help you work across the organization. As I mentioned, bring in those different disciplines. Some of the key things I think to look for there are, it's based on what kind of product you're looking for, but product managers, can come from multiple facets, and they might come from more of a marketing background, or they might come from more of a business analysis background, or maybe they were an engineer at one point and now have decided they would like to manage and oversee the development of the product versus actually coding out that product or designing that product. And so I think making sure that product managers have a good understanding of all three, at least at a high level, becomes really important, because they're going to have to collaborate cross-functionally with people in those skill sets in order to ensure the success of the product. If you're more of an engineering-centric company and it's a very, very technical product, it may make more sense to have a product manager with a little bit more of an engineering background. And I think that has to be, if they're bringing in that kind of discipline. The other argument that can be made, though, is if you have an engineering-centric organization where engineering is really strong across the company maybe it's time to bring in a product leader who can be customer centric and really focus on bringing empathy and helping you understand how technology can find market fit, and helping you how to make that technology accessible and usable to your audience, and giving you a better chance of success. So you really have to look, I think, first and foremost, if you look at either example, it starts with an evaluation of what's the company culture, how mature is that company's culture, and then what level of skill set do you need to start to bring in to amplify the skill sets that are in the company with a new perspective. And if they can do that, then usually you have, I think, a great fit in a product manager who you can really empower to, bring that product to life and manage it through every iteration successfully.
When you mentioned the customer centric organization, I had a little flashback, because in my previous company, we were a bunch of developers. We were very technical. We were exactly as you described, this group of engineers who are geeky, so to speak, and, and also the customers were probably the last people we were really thinking about. And like it's really important to bring someone on board who has this empathy, as you mentioned. That's just something I also need to keep reminding myself. And how can you even recognize some product manager? Because when you look at a CV, no one has on their description mentioned that I'm empathetic and I can recognize the needs of customers. So what would you ask potential candidates? How would you separate those who are very geeky or those who are more customer centric?
Well, I think it's important to vet their actual experience in using those skills. So a couple of examples would come to mind is in an organization, especially like you're describing, if a lot of people are geeky and technical at heart, which I can relate to, is it's really important that you can have somebody who can come in who has can share that spirit, but at the same time, what in their past experiences has helped them communicate effectively with technical teams. And so one great thing that I like to ask is starting to understand, like, well, what's the common language between this role that you want to hire and the team that's built out? And so if we look at customer experience or customer centric as an example, how does that product manager define that? And how does then the company define it? Is it similar? Is it very different? If it's different, is that an opportunity for growth for the company to change their definition and develop a better understanding of what it means to be customer centric? Or does it mean that there's maybe there's a lack of common understanding that needs to be developed in order to make that new role successful, or that candidate is maybe they're not the right candidate for that particular role? And you can't just do that about one issue, but you need to look at topically around, well, across all of the job responsibilities that this individual would have, what are some of the common definitions, and what's the understanding of those things when you talk to that product manager? How would they approach creating, for example, feedback loops, so that an engineering team has regular, consistent customer feedback and insights to inform their user stories and what they're prioritizing to develop? That's really important. And so a product manager can be this, whether they're individually helping do that work, or they're actually working with maybe like a designer or a UX researcher to create that, they're going to be overseen many times in managing that process. And so their understanding of that and being able to articulate that in an interview, I think, becomes really important. The other thing is what I look for personally is, I think, one characteristic that really defines great product managers is they fall in love with the problem that your product is solving, and not with the solution that the company is creating. And I think that's a really important characteristic to look for, because when we fall in love with the problem, we innately are staying focused on the needs of our end user, and not falling in love with the solutions we're creating, which can make us blind to our competition or to really hearing the feedback that we're getting from customers or users. And especially if we're in a B2B marketplace where maybe our customers and our users are not the same individual. And what I mean by that is the customer is the person paying for the product versus the end person using the product. Then, so understanding some of these, key definitions and how to build feedback loops and to bring this insight to a technically, oriented organization becomes really important. And the technical side of the organization will need to trust that individual tremendously. And so making sure that they can balance that with technical acumen so that they, can integrate into that culture becomes really, really important. I think building on that, just one other, going back to your original question about product ownership versus leadership, product owners then have to create the space within the organization for that individual to be successful. And I think it's something for a product manager to really hold the people that are interviewing them accountable for what kind of culture are you setting up for this role to be successful? What is the expectations of the role? What kind of strategy are you creating, or do you already have created that I'm going to be part of participating in driving to move forward? Those are questions that usually don't get asked in an interview process. I think they make people uncomfortable, but it's an exchange that's taking place. And I think they're very fair questions to ask. Do you get to help inform the strategy, or are you being asked to execute on the strategy that the organization has? Because that will really help you make sure that as a potential product manager that you're coming in with, a space that can help you be successful. And at the end, if you're successful, then help the organization be successful and thrive.
Cool. Like these are some great questions. Like even the first one you mentioned, how would you approach frequent feedback loop, or how do you organize it? That's just so good. And also the others that you mentioned. So I'm now wondering, also because of the talent shortage on the market, sometimes it feels like it's less about really interviewing candidates, but candidates interviewing companies, the other way around, because they have so many opportunities to choose from. So what would you say the candidates should actually ask hiring managers or companies? And based on this, we can actually assume, what do CTOs and founders of companies, what do they need to do better in order to attract those product managers or product owners?
Well, in order to attract somebody, you're going to have to, find a product manager who's excited about the industry and the category that you work within. So I think being able to making sure that if you're being interviewed by a candidate for a position, that you're comfortable answering detailed questions about your industry, about how you fit into that industry, being really honest about where your shortcomings are as a company, because maybe you're hiring this role to strengthen the organization. And that's not a negative thing. That's actually a wonderful thing. You've recognized you're now at a place where you can expand the talent of your team and grow the culture of the company. And I think that transparency is helpful with, statistically, it's extremely powerful and helpful with employee engagement. And that's a huge driver of retention. So if you're looking to maximize your opportunity to engage with top talent and then keep them, encourage them to interview you, maybe that's actually a characteristic that will help them stand out in the process. And then for those listening to this, if you're, interviewing different companies, be bold, look for answers to these strategic questions. Is there clarity, for example? Well, what problems am I here to come and help solve? What will I be working on as a product manager? Sometimes companies are very clear and it's very explicit of what role you'll have, where you're going to be working, and what you'll be working on. Are you helping create a new product, or are you taking over an existing product? And if you're taking over that existing product, is it because is it a transition in the team? Is it because of growth? Is it because the product now needs to take a new direction? I think these are not necessarily uncommon questions, but I think they're important questions if they're not being asked that should be, because I think the context that you're coming into is really important. Another example would be just based on what we were talking about, like feedback loops, is what's my access to customers? Do I get to talk to them? Is that supported? Will I be given time? I mean, one of the biggest problems or challenges, I should say, that product managers face is not having enough time to connect and talk with customers. And that's a real challenge. And when they're being asked to inform or drive strategy, they need that insight to guide and support their teams. So, that's a fair question for a product manager to ask in a potential employer is, will I be given the time necessary to engage with prospective customers, or how will I get that information? I think it's also really helpful to ask questions like, well, talk to me about your onboarding process. Usually an onboarding process is focused around processes and, starting to get to understand the team. But I think product managers need to understand a bigger landscape. They need to actually be onboarded cross-functionally in many cases, because they're collaborating across the organization. And so I think that, product managers, and especially technical product managers, it's incredibly advantageous to start to build those relationships when, especially if you are a little bit more technical or introverted, you can come out and really start to say like, well, now I can start to build a structure inside the organization for me to thrive. And that can start in the interview process.
Great. Like the context of why you are joining the team, that's just so important. Now, I had to write it down among all these other questions and statements you mentioned, because a lot of these positions are so similar. It's a product owner, they use the same methodology, whether it is Scrum or Kanban, they use the same tools these days. It's, I don't know, Jira, Confluence, right? Similarities. And what matters at the end is the product, the vision where they can get the product to, and also, the context of why actually the person is joining. So it's so true, as you mentioned. Cool. Okay. And based on your experience, what are some mistakes these managers or founders, what are some mistakes they make when they bring someone on board? Say this smaller company, 50 people, 100 people, they bring someone on board, and then after 6 months, they notice it doesn't work. What is usually the root cause?
So some of the root causes of that can be one, I circle back to the customer. Do they actually understand the needs of the customer, and have they been able to turn that insight into an effective strategy and plan of action to inform the product or service they're creating? That's going to directly impact who you're hiring and why you're hiring them. I think a lot of organizations too fundamentally make a mistake of confusing planning with strategy, where planning is looked at as we're going to hit these milestones with these targets, and we're going to do it on these dates, and we're going to spend this X number of resources. And planning is incredibly important, but has nothing to do with strategy. And so depending on where you're at in the organization and what maturity level you're at, it's amazing that a lot of organizations have done an incredible amount of planning, but that planning gives a false sense of security, and it sets up organizations for underperforming on many of their initiatives because the foundations of strategy were missing from that path. And so you have candidates who potentially are coming in and they're really told to focus on execution. And so the deliverable becomes more important than the outcome, because the necessary outcomes and what order they need to happen aren't clear. And so it's sometimes difficult to see that until something hasn't worked. And now the organization is feeling the pain, the cost of time or money or attrition of team members. And so it's really important to making sure that, as you are developing these paths and looking to expand your team and maybe take on product managers or build out entire product teams, that you understand those fundamental differences, because it will essentially set the foundation for success. I think the other thing is really making sure that you understand the steps of the product life cycle. That's another really big one that we see is there's a tendency for people to look for shortcuts around the things that they don't understand. So I've seen technical teams try to shortcut the design process because they don't understand the value that's being produced there. I've seen a design-centered, organizations, shortchange and not understand the complexity of engineering and not giving them the time to develop the product correctly. And so every piece is dependent upon the other. And so understanding the value of each step and how it contributes to the outcome for the business becomes really important. And I think if an organization doesn't understand that, it would be beneficial to them to pause and to take stock in what that is before they start asking people to deliver on those things, or make sure they're hiring new product managers or new product owners and leaders that can bring in those expertise to support the organization going forward.
And is this something you cover in the book? Because now after you mention all this, I feel like I need to learn more about this particular area, because your ideas or the approach is just so fresh. And as I mentioned, I have all these flashbacks of what we did wrong in the past, and maybe some other CTOs are also, still, doing it the wrong way or the inefficient way. So is this what you also wrote about in the book?
This is a big part of what I wrote about in my book. And, in the book, I identify 8 root causes for product failure or lack of performance. I mean, we've only touched on a few of them, but the entire book is really broken down about how you look at aligning an organization for success, the root causes of failure, and then what leadership looks like, and then really understanding the foundation of strategy so you can set up your teams to be successful and to scale.
And where can people learn more about the book? Where they can purchase it?
They can go to, it's available at Amazon, and it's Alignment, Overcoming Internal Sabotage and Digital Product Failure.
Awesome. Do you also have a website? I think I saw some website before.
So
Product Alignment.
Right? My productalignment.com is the site for the book. So you can also go there and check it out. And there's a bunch of free tools and resources for anybody that visits the site that are available there, and as well as a discussion guide for any product team that is interested.
Awesome. I'll link this website in the show notes or the comment section under the video on YouTube. Okay. Before we wrap it up, is there anything you would like to mention to fellow listeners, founders, or IT recruiters?
Well, I would just like to say, I know that there's probably more demand for technical solutions, and digital transformation is driving the world economy more than it ever has before. And so I encourage anybody listening to really, this is an incredible opportunity time for you as a potential employee and for employers. And so I wish everyone who's listening just the best of success with their digital product and their initiatives going forward, because it's just an incredible time to be in tech.
Yes, so there is an abundance of opportunities for everyone in IT, right? Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks a lot, and we'll keep in touch.
All right. We look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.